On a moonless night, Eli Rowan worked alone beneath the creaking well-beam, hauling water with blistered hands, while frost silvered the dead fields. The farm slept. Only he remained awake, as always. Then came the sound, something heavy stumbling. Beyond the boundary stones, he took his lantern and found her collapsed in the dark grass, half hidden by thorn and shadow. She was enormous, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a torn black cloak soaked with blood. A broken spear jutted from her side. Strands of dark hair clung to her face, and beneath her curled upper lip gleamed two short, sharp tusks, small for an orc, but unmistakable. When Eli knelt to help, her hand shot out and locked around his wrist with terrifying strength. Her fever-bright eyes opened. "Don't," she rasped. "If they see me with you, they'll kill you first." Eli Rowan's world is small, cold, and always one bad season away from ruin. He lives alone on a failing farm at the far edge of the village, where the soil is thin, the fences lean, and the wind seems to slip through every crack in the house, no matter how much cloth he stuffs into them. His father died with calluses on his hands and debt on his name. His mother followed 2 winters later, leaving Eli nothing but a weather-beaten cottage, a stubborn mule, a few chickens, and land that feeds more stones than grain. He is young, but exhaustion has already settled into him like something permanent. In the village, people know him only as the quiet farm boy who works hard, speaks little, and is never invited where laughter lives. He works nights because nights are easier. In darkness, no one sees how poor he is, no one sees how alone. After finding the wounded orc woman beyond his boundary stones, Eli ignores every fearful thought telling him to run. He cannot leave her. There to freeze or bleed out, the effort of moving her is brutal. She's far larger than he is, all muscle and dead weight, and even unconscious she feels dangerous, as though violence lives in her bones. He drags an old wooden feed sled from the barn, lifts her onto it inch by inch, and hauls her across frozen furrows toward the old lambing shed behind the main house. Her blood smears the wood. The mule panics at her scent. Twice he nearly loses his grip. Still, he keeps going. Inside the shed, Eli bars the door, lights a single lantern, and gets to work. He has no healer's training, only the hard knowledge that comes from tending animals, stitching his own cuts, and watching poor people survive without help. He breaks the rest of the spear shaft, cleans the wound with boiled water and spirits, and binds her side with torn strips from one of his only decent shirts. Up close, the mystery deepens. Her cloak is ragged on the outside, but finely woven beneath the dirt. The metal clasp at her shoulder is dented yet beautifully made. Her tusks are short and elegant, not brutish. Her hands are scarred like a fighter's, but one finger bears the faint mark of a ring long removed. Nothing about her feels ordinary. When she wakes, the shed changes. The air turns sharp with tension. Her golden eyes snap to him, then to the door, then to the knife on the stool. Even wounded, she radiates command. Eli steps back, bowl in hand, and tells her if he meant to harm her, he would have left her outside. She does not thank him. She asks where she is, who else knows, and what price he intends to demand. Her voice is rough with fever but proud. One tusk shows when she speaks, making every word feel like a challenge. Eli answers plainly. No one knows. This is his farm, and he wants nothing except for her not to die in his shed. She does not believe him at first. Orcs and humans do not meet like this, not alone, not in secret, not without blood following. Humans fear orcs as raiders, giants and border terrors. Orcs see humans as frail creatures who lie, bargain, and bow too easily. Everything about their first exchange is wrong by the laws of both worlds. Yet when she tries to rise and nearly collapses from pain, Eli catches her before she hits the ground. For one suspended second, the difference between them becomes painfully clear. Her body is stronger, heavier, made for battle. His is smaller, worn by labor, but steady enough to hold what he can. He helps her back down, and she allows it only because she has no strength left to refuse. Before dawn, riders pass on the distant road. Eli hears faint voices through the wind, men searching, asking questions, promising silver for news of a fugitive. Inside the shed, the orc woman goes deathly still. Her hand closes over a hidden piece of metal sewn into her cloak lining, and for the first time, Eli sees something that looks less like fear and more like dread. That is when he understands the truth. He has not hidden some nameless wounded stranger. He has brought someone dangerous, important, and hunted into the weakest place in his world. Morning comes hard and grey, and Eli begins living two lives at once. By day, he is still the same poor farm boy the village overlooks. He hauls feed, patches a broken fence, chops kindling, and drags a stubborn plough through cold soil that barely rewards the effort. He keeps his head down when passing neighbors. Call half-hearted greetings or ask whether he heard riders on the road last night. He lies for the first time with a straight face, saying he heard only wind and his own loose shutters. The lie sits badly in him, but not badly enough to send the wounded stranger back into the frost. By night, when the fields go black and the world narrows to lantern glow, he slips behind the barn with food, water, and clean bandages for the orc woman hidden in the lambing shed. The wound in her side is worse than he first feared. The spear did not strike cleanly. It tore deep and left bruising around the edges that darkens by the hour. Fever comes and goes like a tide. Some nights she shakes beneath the blankets, breath rough and fast. Other nights she sits upright against the wall, silent and watchful, looking less like a patient than a warrior waiting for the next attack. Eli keeps the fire low and changes her dressings with steady hands. He boils cloth, cleans the wound, crushes herbs his mother once used for swelling, and feeds her broth one careful cup at a time. She complains about everything. The broth is thin. The blankets smell like goats. Human sheds are built like traps for weak bones. Human lanterns smoke too much. Human water tastes of old wood. Eli answers dryly that she is welcome to return to the ditch where he found her if she prefers better lodging. The first time he says it, her eyes flash with anger. The second time, he catches the faintest shadow of reluctant amusement. It vanishes. So quickly he almost thinks he imagined it. She still gives him no true name. When he asks what to call her, she says, "Call me nothing. It is safer." He shrugs and starts referring to her as Orchid Thorn in his own mind because of the strange contrast she carries. Dangerous, sharp, yet not without beauty. Out loud, he mostly calls her you, and she seems to dislike that less than she dislikes every other option. Their early trust does not grow from warmth, it grows from repetition. He returns every night. No matter how tired he is, no matter how bitter the wind, no matter how little food he can spare, he comes back. He brings bread softened in broth when chewing hurts her. He props a bucket near enough that she can reach it without standing. He leaves a knife within her reach as well, not because he trusts her completely, but because he understands that pride can be as necessary as medicine. She notices everything. In turn, she starts watching him with less immediate hostility. At first her stare feels like a threat, the way a wolf might study a gate before testing it, but slowly it changes. She watches how he enters quietly so he does not startle her. She watches him pause before touching the bandages, always giving her a chance to refuse, even when refusing would be foolish. She watches him split his meager supper in half without ceremony. More than once she catches him pretending he is not hungry, so she will eat the larger portion. One night, while Eli cleans the wound again, the fever spikes. The pain is brutal. She grips a wooden beam so hard it creaks. He tells her to bite down on a strip of leather if she needs to. She refuses. Orc pride will not allow it. Then the cloth touches the deeper tear, and a broken sound escapes her before she can stop it. Eli does not stare. He does not flinch. He just keeps working, voice low and even, talking about small practical things, the weather turning, the mule nearly kicking him that morning, the north fence needing mending, as if pain is easier to survive when the world remains ordinary around it. That unsettles her more than pity would have. Later that same night, exhaustion finally drops Eli where he sits. He means only to rest his eyes for a moment by the door, but sleep takes him with his back against the wall, sleeves rolled, dried blood still on his hands. Sometime before dawn, the orc woman wakes clearer than she has in days. She sees him, there in the weak lantern light, head bowed, body slumped from labor, too tired even to reach his own bed. This human male, small, thin by orc standards, patched at the elbows, too gentle for the world he lives in, has hidden a creature his people fear and ask nothing in return. For the first time, her expression softens when he cannot see it. She drags one of the extra blankets over him. It is awkward, painful, and infuriates her wound, but she does it anyway. When Eli wakes at dawn and realizes what happened, he says nothing. He only folds the blanket and places it back near her without comment. That silence becomes a kind of understanding. As the days pass, small pieces of culture slip between them. He learns that orcs do not use thanks the way humans do. Gratitude is shown in remembered acts, not soft words. She learns that Eli speaks to the hens and mule under his breath when he works, not because he's foolish, but because creatures behave better when treated like they matter. He tells her that storms can be smelled before they are seen. She tells him that among her people, scars on the right arm are often worn proudly, while scars on the back are spoken of only in shame or grief. He notices she has none on her back. Then comes the first true danger. Near sunset, 2 village men and the Reeves' cousin ride into his yard, claiming they are searching all nearby farms after reports of movement near the border. Eli feels his stomach drop before they even dismount. The cousin is the kind of man who enjoys suspicion too much. He asks whether Eli has seen strange tracks, heard foreign voices, or noticed missing livestock. Eli answers carefully, hands steady, though his pulse pounds. The men glance toward the back buildings. One says they should inspect the sheds. Inside the lambing shed, the orc woman has heard everything. She forces herself upright, barely able to breathe without pain, and takes the small farm knife Eli left for her. It looks ridiculous in her hand, a child's weapon against what she must once have wielded, but her grip on it is deadly. She positions herself beside the door, where even wounded she could kill the first man through the throat before the others. Understood what they had found. Outside, Eli intercepts them with a lie layered inside another lie. He says the lambing shed roof is half collapsed and unsafe. He says if they want to search it, they can do the repairs afterward themselves. One of the men laughs and says nothing worth stealing would ever be hidden on a farm like this anyway. The others laugh too. The words sting Eli. But from inside the shed, the orc woman hears them and understands something more painful than insult. His poverty is the only reason they leave. When the hoofbeats finally fade, Eli stands in the yard, breathing hard. He enters the shed to find her still holding the knife, hand trembling from strain. "Why?" she asks him at last, voice low and rough. "Why risk this for me?" He meets her gaze, tired beyond pretending. "Because I'm tired of watching stronger people decide which frightened thing deserves mercy." For a long moment she says nothing. Then quietly, as if the word costs her more than blood, she gives him a name. Not her true one, but a name nonetheless. And later that night, when Eli is at the well under moonlight, he glances toward the shed and sees her standing in the doorway for the first time, wrapped in his old blanket, weak but upright. Tusks, pale in the dark, watching him work the way she must have watched from the shadows, long before he ever found her. After that night, something subtle changes between Eli and the orc woman. The danger is still there, sharp as ever, but it no longer fills every silence between them. Now the silence begins to hold something else: awareness, rhythm, a strange, fragile ease neither of them knows how to name. Her strength returns in careful pieces. First, she can sit without bracing one hand against the wall. Then she can stand for short moments. Then she begins moving around the lambing shed in Eli's absence, leaving behind small signs of herself that make the place feel less like a hiding hole and more like an occupied space. A bucket is moved closer to the fire so the water won't freeze as fast. A broken stool Eli meant to repair for weeks is mended with clean, efficient lashwork stronger than before. His dull, skinning knife is left sharpened so finely it catches the lantern light like silver. She never announces these things. He simply notices them one by one and understands that this is how someone like her begins to repay what she cannot yet say aloud. Their nights grow into routine. Eli finishes the evening chores, waits until the village has gone dark, and slips behind the barn with food hidden beneath old feed cloth. Sometimes it is broth with onions and carrots, sometimes roasted roots, sometimes only rough bread, a little goat cheese and dried apple slices saved from autumn. They eat near the low fire while wind presses softly against the walls. At first, they speak only when necessary. Then slowly the conversations lengthen. He asks practical questions, never the ones that would corner her. Which herbs stop blood faster? How do orcs keep wounds from rotting in summer campaigns? Why do orc-made blades hold an edge longer than any village iron he has seen? She answers cautiously at first, then with more detail when she realizes he is not fishing for weakness, only trying to understand how things are done in a world beyond his own. In return, she asks him things she clearly never expected to care about. Why do humans hang woven straw charms over stable doors? Why do village women bury eggshells beneath bean rows? Why does he know the sound each chicken makes when one goes missing before dawn? His answers are simple, almost embarrassingly ordinary, but she listens as though common things are a language she has never heard spoken with respect. One night, he tells her about his mother's cracked blue teacup, the one he still keeps, though the handle has been glued twice and the glaze is spidered with age. He says she used to drink from it on winter mornings and claim that warm hands made bad days easier to bear. The orc woman is quiet a long time after that. Then she admits that in her world, cups are often made of horn, silver, or polished stone, but none of them ever meant home to her, the way one chipped cup seems to mean home to him. It is one of the first times she speaks without armor in her voice. He begins to see pieces of her pain too, though never all at once. Once, when a horse on the road beyond the farm screams in panic at night, she wakes with a hand at her throat and murder in her eyes before realizing where she is. Another time, while binding her side, Eli notices an old scar under her collarbone. Small, precise, nothing like a battlefield cut. She covers it at once and says only, "That one came from trust." He does not ask more. He does not need to. The answer is heavy enough. Their closeness deepens through small acts no one else would ever call romantic, but which begin to matter precisely because neither of them can fake them. When rain leaks through the shed roof, Eli climbs up in the dark to patch it before it can drip onto her bedding. He nearly slips and breaks his neck in the mud. She is furious when she learns why he did it, calling him reckless, soft-headed, and too willing to break himself for things that can survive discomfort. But later, he finds the driest blanket wrapped around his shoulders and knows she was awake longer than she admitted. One evening, after a hard day in the lower field, Eli comes to the shed with split knuckles and a limp from a kicked plough beast. Before he can pretend it is nothing, she catches his wrist and pulls his hand into the lantern light. He expects mockery. Instead, she cleans the cuts with rough competence and binds them using cleaner cloth than he would have wasted on himself. Her tusks flash faintly when she mutters that humans are terrible at preserving useful tools, and apparently that includes their own hands. The moment is brief, unsentimental, and somehow more intimate than if either had tried to soften it. The first real tremor of emotional danger comes later. Eli falls asleep one night while sitting near the door again, too worn out even to finish, the crust in his hand. The fire has gone low. Moonlight reaches through the broken slats, laying pale bars across the floor. The orc woman watches him for a long time. Not like a threat, not like a puzzle, like someone seeing a truth she has been trying not to name. This human has no rank, no armor, no power that the world respects. Yet he has given her shelter without leverage, care without humiliation, and time without demanding answers. In her world, closeness is often bought, negotiated, or claimed. Here, beside a failing farm and a half-dead fire, it has simply been built. When Eli stirs awake, he finds her looking away too late. The air between them tightens. He changes her bandage in silence. She sits very still. Their faces come closer than either expects. He can feel the heat of her skin, the controlled strength in the line of her jaw, the breath that catches for just 1 second when his fingers brush the edge of a scar near her. Ribs. She can smell rain, soap, smoke, and the honest labor on him. Neither moves forward, neither fully retreats. The pause itself becomes dangerous, so she breaks it. She asks him why he works nights when no one is there to see the effort. Eli ties off the bandage and says, after a long pause, maybe because it hurts less to be unseen when you're already used to it. The answer hits her harder than he knows. For the first time, she tells him something true enough to matter. She says there were many people in her life who saw her power, her bloodline, her use, or the fear she could inspire. Very few ever saw when she was tired. Fewer cared. That confession changes the room. From then on, they begin speaking in deeper fragments. He tells her he once thought leaving the farm would save him, but grief can travel as easily as a man can. She tells him that running from certain halls does not mean their voices stop living in your bones. He admits he hates being looked through by people with money, titles, or certainty. She admits she has done that very thing to others and wears the shame of it now that she knows the cost. But as their bond strengthens, pressure begins creeping closer from both worlds. In the village, rumors grow sharper. Riders have been seen near the river road more than once. A merchant claims an orc war banner was glimpsed in the hills. The reeve begins asking too many questions about strangers, hidden goods, and late-night lanterns. A widow from the next farm over remarks that Eli seems more tired than usual and wonders aloud what keeps him awake after midnight. The orc woman hears all of this and grows restless. One morning, Eli enters the shed and finds blood on the floorboards. Fresh. A small trail leads out the back where she must have tried to leave before dawn. Panic hits him cold and immediate. He follows the traces through frost-burned grass to the ridge above the farm and finds her there on one knee, one hand pressed to her reopened wound, staring toward the distant black line of the mountains. He is angrier than he has ever been with her. He demands to know if she wants to die so badly she had to choose a prettier view for it. She fires back that staying near him will destroy him long before it saves her. He says leaving half-healed is not sacrifice, just stupidity wearing pride as a mask. She rises despite the pain, towering over him in the wind, and for one charged. Second, it feels like all the old distrust might come crashing back. Then she says very low, "You do not understand what follows my name." Eli steps closer anyway. "No," he says, "but I understand enough. Men don't search fields in the dark for a nobody. And whatever you are, it's getting closer." She looks at him then with something rawer than anger. Fear, not for herself, but for him. That night, war horns sound faint and far beyond the hills, and when Eli turns toward her, she finally says the words that make the fire seem suddenly too small for either of them. "The name I gave you was not mine." The confession does not come like thunder. It comes quietly, which makes it far worse. The fire in the lambing shed has burned low. Dawn is still a long way off. Outside, the fields lie cold and black beneath a sky with no mercy in it. Eli stands across from her, every part of him suddenly too awake as the words settle between them. The name she gave him was not hers. For a moment he says nothing. Not because he has no questions, but because too many rise at once. Every night he has spent hiding her, every lie he has told, every risk taken in the dark with no promise of safety. He realizes now that even after all the broth, blood, silence, and fragile trust, he has still been standing beside a locked door. She sees the hurt before he speaks. That seems to wound her more than anger would have. At last she gives him the truth. Her name is Varesha. Not just Varesha, but Varesha of the Iron Tusk line, war-born daughter of a ruling bloodhouse, oath-bearer to one of the oldest mountain clans, and the woman who was meant to stand at the center of a political union that could have bound rival orc factions into peace, or chained them into a more elegant kind of war. She was not merely a noble, she was a living banner, a future weighed down with expectation, command, and danger. The wound in her side did not come from strangers on the road. It came from betrayal during an escort meant to deliver her safely across the high passes to a council gathering. Men and orcs alike were paid to believe she never survived the attack. Others were paid to make sure of it. The shed feels smaller with every word. Eli stares at her as if the walls themselves have shifted. He thinks of the dented clasp, the hidden insignia, the way armed men searched the roads, the reflexive command in her voice even half-conscious, the scars that looked too deliberate for an ordinary fighter. He had known she was important, but this is something else. This is the kind of importance that gets villages burned, borders redrawn, and quiet lives crushed under decisions made far away. And suddenly, he understands why she never came close. Not just physically. In every way that mattered. The realization hits with humiliation as much as shock. He has been sharing stale bread and patched blankets with a woman born into halls he cannot imagine, into a world that would never once have looked at him except as labor, inconvenience, or beneath notice. Whatever tenderness had begun growing between them now collides with the brutal shape of status. He is a poor farm boy, with dirt under his nails and debt in his name. She is the kind of woman whose survival moves armed riders across 2 territories. When he finally speaks, his voice is quieter than hers was. "You let me risk everything," he says, "and still thought I could be trusted with less than your shadow." Varesha does not defend herself quickly. That matters. She does not hide behind rank, does not command him into understanding. Instead, she tells the ugliest truth first. At the beginning, she did not trust him enough to give him her name, because names like hers kill the people who hear them. Then she says the harder truth after it, that later, when she began to want to tell him, she was afraid of what would change in his eyes once he knew. That answer lands deep because both of them know it is already happening. Eli withdraws, not theatrically, but in the most painful way possible. He becomes practical, formal, distant. He checks the bandage with careful hands that no longer linger. He adds wood to the fire without meeting her gaze. He speaks to her as though she is already someone passing through, instead of someone who has occupied his nights, his worry, and the quiet center of his heart before he was ready to name it. Varesha, who has likely faced armed councils, without. Flinching seems more unsettled by that restraint than by accusation. Then the world outside breaks in with force. Before sunrise, mounted figures appear at the ridge. Not villagers, not simple border riders. These wear layered armor, fur-lined cloaks, and the marked tusk crests of the Iron Tusk line. But even from a distance, Eli can tell they are not one united party. The first group rides in disciplined formation, banners furled, their pace controlled, searching with purpose rather than hunger. The second arrives later and less cleanly, armored in darker colors, moving like men and orcs who expect violence before speech. Two factions, two intents, both hunting the same woman. The farm becomes a point of collision in a matter of minutes. Varesha stands, despite Eli's protest, pain carving itself into the line of her mouth as she pulls on her half-mended gear. For the first time, she looks fully like what she is. Not merely a wounded fugitive, but someone forged for command. Even pale from blood loss, she seems to gather the room around herself. Eli sees it now with painful clarity, the instinct that made others follow her long before he knew her name. The first envoys dismount and call her by title, not just lady. Not captain, Varesha, blood heir of Iron Tusk. The words strike the yard like iron dropped on stone. Eli feels the full absurdity of what he has done. He has hidden a woman whose name can stop armed riders mid-step, a woman whose fate matters to people who would not remember his face a week after his death. The distance between them, once softened by firelight and routine, now opens wide enough to swallow every fragile thing that grew in the shed. The confrontation that follows is layered with danger. Loyal retainers urge Varesha to come at once, warning that her absence has emboldened rivals and driven the clan council toward chaos. The darker faction speaks more carefully, but their politeness carries threat. If she does not return under approved terms, there will be consequences for every human settlement accused of sheltering her. Eli understands then that his farm is no longer merely poor ground, it is leverage. One of the rival envoys looks at him with open disgust, mud on his boots, patched coat, split knuckles, human, common. The envoy asks Varesha if this is truly the creature she entrusted with her breath. Not man, creature. The insult is deliberate, meant to restore hierarchy by humiliation. Varesha's expression hardens in a way Eli has not seen before. Dangerous, regal, cold enough to cut. But before she can answer, Eli does. Not with defiance, born of pride, but with the cracked hurt of someone finally seeing the edge of a dream he never admitted to himself. So that's what this becomes now, he says. You stand back on your feet, and I remember what I am. Varesha turns to him then, and what passes over her face is not shame alone. It is grief. He asks her one question that matters more than all the titles in the yard. When you watched me in the fields before I found you, what was I to you? There is a long silence. Every rider hears it. The wind hears it. The whole miserable farm seems to hold its breath. Then Varesha answers with the one truth she can no longer afford. To hide, at first. A place weak enough to be ignored. The words cut. She steps closer despite the watching guards, despite the politics, despite the blood still seeping beneath the bandage. And then, she says, voice lower, rougher, far more dangerous because it is honest. You became the first thing I ever watched because it was kind. That line changes everything and solves nothing, because the moment it lands, the rival faction moves, steel flashes, orders are shouted. One of the darker riders signals toward the barn, the house, the fields, as if measuring exactly how much of Eli's life can be burned to force obedience. The loyal envoys draw weapons, horses rear, the fragile boundary between private feeling and public consequence is destroyed. Eli realizes with sick clarity that loving someone like Varesha was never going to remain a hidden thing. Not in this world, not with bloodlines and politics and fear standing this close. And Varesha realizes that every extra hour she stays near him turns his home into a target. So, when the clash is barely held back by threat of mutual slaughter, Eli does the only thing a hurt man can do to reclaim a scrap of control. He tells her to leave. Not because he does not care, but because he cares enough to know that if she remains, stronger people will keep choosing the price of his life in front of him. The worst part is that she obeys, not with surrender, not with indifference, but with the devastated stillness of someone who knows this retreat may save his body while breaking something she had no right to want. At dawn, Varesha rides away. Beneath escort and threat banners snapping in the pale wind. She turns back only once. Eli does not lift a hand. And when the yard falls silent again, the farm feels emptier than it ever did before she came. Because now he knows what it was to be seen, and what it costs when that gaze is taken away. The days after Varesha's departure do not return Eli to the life he had before. That life is gone, and not because the farm has changed, but because he has. Once, loneliness had been a dull, familiar ache, worn smooth by repetition. Now it has edges. Every part of the farm bears her absence like a mark. The lambing shed still smells faintly of smoke, iron, and the sharp medicinal herbs he used on her wound. The stool she repaired remains stronger than the others. The knife she sharpened keeps too fine an edge for a place this poor. Even the blanket she once pulled over him now feels heavier when night falls. He works because work is the only thing his hands know how to do when his thoughts become dangerous. He hauls water, mends fence, clears stones from the upper field. But the village no longer looks at him the same way. The Reeves' cousin returns twice in 1 week, pretending concern while testing the edges of threat. Debts that had been ignored for months are suddenly remembered. A grain merchant who once gave him time now wants payment before the thaw. Neighbors who used to overlook him now linger too long at his gate, measuring him with nervous curiosity. Word has spread, though no one has proof. Something passed through Eli Rowan's poor little farm, and men with titles rode after it. He understands then that Varesha was right. Closeness to her does not leave a man untouched. Even in her absence, her shadow has changed the shape of his life. At the same time, rumors gather like storm clouds. Riders on the North Road, fires seen. In the hills, orc horns sounding farther south than they should. Some say the Iron Tusk line is fracturing. Some say a marriage pact has failed. Others whisper that a blood heir, who should have returned in chains instead, vanished with loyal fighters around her, and now rival factions are sharpening old grudges into open war. Eli hears fragments in the market, in the blacksmith's yard, outside the tavern where he never goes, but cannot help passing. He learns enough to understand one terrible thing. Whatever choice Varesha makes next will not only decide her own future, it may decide whether the borderlands burn. Still, none of that feels as immediate as the simple emptiness of night. Then she comes back. Not in secrecy this time, not hidden under blood and torn cloth. She arrives in daylight beneath a cold silver sky, riding at the head of a small escort that carries itself with disciplined silence. Her armor is dark and elegant, fitted close where the wound would still be healing beneath it. Her cloak bears the Iron Tusk crest openly now. Tusks, polished. Black leather, iron rings, and the weight of command turn her into something the village would call terrifying. But Eli sees the strain beneath it, the slight guardedness when she dismounts, the controlled way she keeps one hand near her side, the exhaustion she has learned to hide from everyone except, perhaps, him. The entire yard goes still. Even the mule seems to sense that something larger than fear has stepped onto the farm. Varesha dismisses her escort to the edge of the fields. That alone says more than any title could. She does not come to Eli as ruler to subject or savior to someone. Beneath saving, she crosses the muddy yard herself, boots dark with thawed earth, and stops before him with no one between them but wind and memory. When she speaks, her voice holds neither command nor apology at first, only truth. She tells him the council is split. Her survival shattered the plans of those who meant to control her, and now every faction wants to use what happened at the farm for its own purpose. Some wish her to deny him publicly, to call him nothing, to erase the weakness of needing a human's help. Others want to display him as proof of her mercy, as though he were a curious artifact she picked up from poverty. She rejected both. That refusal has cost her support, safety, and time. Then she makes the offer. It is not small, it is not cautious. It is the kind of offer that could alter the life of a man like Eli so completely it would feel like tearing up his roots with bare hands. She offers to place his farm under iron tusk protection, shielding it from debt seizures, border raids, and the petty cruelty of local power. She offers land enough to make the place live again. She offers him a place in her household, not as a servant, not as hidden shame, but under her name and public protection where none could quietly erase him. More than that, she offers him formal bond by orc custom if he wants it. A witnessed vow that would declare before both worlds that the life he saved is not a debt to be repaid and forgotten, but a tie she herself chooses to honor beyond politics. The weight of it nearly drives all air from him. For a poor farm boy who has spent his whole life being overlooked, this should sound like salvation. Yet Eli's first feeling is not relief. It is fear, not fear of her, fear of disappearing. He asks the question that has been cutting at him since the day the riders called her by title. If he comes with her, what is he meant to be in that world? A man, a symbol, a kindness she decided to keep, a curiosity in halls where everyone will know he was born to mud and hunger. He tells her plainly that he will not trade one kind of invisibility for another. He does not want to be paraded as proof of her unusual heart, while every noble mouth around him quietly measures how little he belongs. The honesty of it hits them both like cold water. Varesha does not answer in anger. She steps closer, and what she gives him then is harder than any grand promise. She gives him vulnerability. She says her own halls no longer feel fully hers either. Betrayal hollowed them. Rank did not protect her. Bloodline did not comfort her. When she lay bleeding in his shed, the people around her knew how to use her title, her strength, her future. Very few knew how to see when she was exhausted, frightened, or close to breaking. He did. Not because he was trained to, not because he wanted favor, but because kindness is how he survives the world. She tells him that what she is offering is not rescue, it is choice. She is choosing the one place she was ever weak without being made small. That truth nearly undoes him. Before he can answer, the outside world forces itself upon them again. One of her scouts rides in hard from the north with warning. A rival. Claimant has moved faster than expected. Armed supporters are gathering. If Varesha does not return by nightfall with a clear public position, the council chamber will become a battlefield, and those loyal to her may die buying time she no longer has. At nearly the same moment, the Reeve and two armed men appear at the lane, emboldened by fear and gossip, demanding to know why armed orcs stand on village land. The pressure closes from both sides at once. Human suspicion, orc politics, status, blood, class, fear, everything that has stalked them since the first night now stands in the open. Eli sees the shape of the choice clearly at last. There is no road that returns him to the life before her. Even if he sends her away again, the world has already changed its gaze upon him. He can stay and let fear decide the boundaries of his life forever, or he can step into something dangerous with open eyes, not because she is powerful, not because she can save him, but because for the first time someone saw him in the dark and did not turn away. Still, he will not go as a lesser thing. He tells Varesha his terms. If he stands beside her, he does so as himself, not hidden, not softened into a story that flatters. Noble ears. He will not be displayed as debt repaid. He will not bow for a place at her table if everyone there expects him to be grateful just for being tolerated. If both their worlds are to challenge what they are, then the challenge must be real. The yard falls quiet. Then Varesha, blood heir of Iron Tusk, does something no envoy, reeve or rival could have predicted. In full view of her escort, the village, men, and the open road, she extends her hand to him, not down like a ruler granting favor, but level, equal, unmistakable, and she says that if he comes beside her. That is the sacrifice hidden inside the offer. By choosing him publicly, she risks more than mockery. She gives her enemies a weapon. She lowers no rank, but she defies the customs that keep rank clean. She is not merely asking him to be brave, she is being brave first. Eli looks at her hand, at the farm behind him, at the narrow life that once felt like all he would ever deserve. Then he takes her hand, not because the road will be easy, not because either of them has defeated the world that shaped them, but because some choices are worth the wound they leave behind. And as they turn together toward the waiting riders, the old farm boy, who once worked alone at night, understands. That belonging was never going to be given to him gently. It would have to be chosen. What follows is not peace in the simple sense. It is peace earned the hard way, through exposure, fracture, and the refusal to return to old shapes just because they are familiar. When Varesha and Eli arrive before the Iron Tusk Council, they do not walk into a room ready for reconciliation. They walk into a hall already leaning toward violence. Rival banners hang too stiffly. Hands rest too near weapons. Elders speak of order, duty, blood, and legacy. But beneath every formal word is the same raw truth. Too many people built their plans on Varesha being controllable, absent, or dead. Her return is not merely an inconvenience. It is a threat to every arrangement made in her silence. Eli is judged before he is even announced. Human, farm-born, narrow-shouldered by orc standards, plainly dressed despite every effort to prepare him. To many in that hall, he looks exactly like the kind of man history expects to be swallowed and forgotten. That first gaze matters because it lets the audience feel how impossible his place there still is. But Eli does not try to perform grandeur. That is what makes him stronger than expected. He stands quietly, muddy truth carried into carved stone. He does not speak unless asked. He does not shrink when insulted. And when one rival finally sneers that a blood heir of Iron Tusk has demeaned herself by tying her fate to a human laborer, Eli answers with the same quality that first changed Varesha's gaze in the fields, plain courage. He says he did not save her to rise, he saved her because she was dying. If that shames anyone in the hall, perhaps the shame belongs to those who left her there. That line breaks something open. It forces the room, for one dangerous moment, to confront the difference between power and worth. The betrayal inside the clan is then dragged fully into light. Evidence Varesha carried in secret, marks on the spear shaft, testimony from one surviving loyal guard, coded orders intercepted by her allies, reveals which faction arranged the attack meant to remove her from succession while preserving the appearance of lawful transition. The rival claimant does not fall easily. There is shouting, denial, ritual challenge, and a near burst of bloodshed on the council floor. But the truth has weight now, and Varesha is no longer isolated. Her survival, her return, and Eli's visible presence all become part of the same unbreakable fact. The future they tried to script in private has failed. The external conflict resolves not with perfect harmony, but with decisive consequence. The conspirators are stripped, divided, or driven out according to clan law. A forced marriage pact meant to bind Varesha's future is shattered. Border. Raiding is halted, at least for now, because open civil fracture would weaken everyone. Human envoys, seeing the strength of her restored claim and the risk of wider war, choose caution over escalation. No one leaves fully satisfied. That is why the resolution feels real, but victory costs them both. Varesha secures her place, yet her rule begins under scrutiny sharper than before. Some will always say she returned changed in ways they do not trust. Some will never forgive the public choice she made. Eli, in turn, cannot go back to being invisible. Even if he returned to the old farm and tried to bury himself in labor, the world has already marked him. He has been seen in the wrong places, beside the wrong woman, at the center of decisions too large for ordinary men. The life he had is not waiting for him untouched. That truth gives the ending emotional cost. So the future they build is not one of simple escape. It is one of transformation. The farm remains part of that future. That matters deeply. Whether it becomes protected borderland under Varesha's seal, a restored holding they return to between obligations, or the first shared place remade by both human and orc hands, it is not abandoned like an embarrassing chapter. It becomes the one piece of earth where rank first failed and sincerity first held. Eli helps rebuild the lower wall, strengthen the roof, and turn the poor field toward life again with better tools and steadier support. Varesha, when she comes there, is no longer a hunted shadow in a torn cloak. She comes openly, still powerful, still feared by some, but no longer forced to stand at a distance from the one place that asked nothing of her title. And Eli changes too. He does not become noble in manner or polished in speech. He remains practical, grounded, and quiet. But the old habit of making himself small begins to die. He has stood in halls built to diminish men like him and remained himself. That matters more than any silk, title, or protection ever could. Varesha changes in a different way. She does not become softer in strength, but wiser in how she holds it. Around him, command no longer has to be armor. Every second, she learns the rare dignity of being cared for without being diminished. The final emotional callback comes at night. Sometime later, after the first violence has settled and the hard work of new peace has begun. Eli is again out in the fields after dark. He is repairing a broken section of fence by lantern light, sleeves rolled, hands rough, breath silver in the cold. It is an image from the beginning of the story, the same lonely labor, the same quiet night. But now he is not alone in it. He senses her before he hears her. No need for fear now, no shadow hiding behind boundary stones, no wounded silence waiting to be discovered. When he turns, Varesha is already crossing the field toward him in plain sight, her dark cloak moving through moonlight, tusks pale when she smiles just slightly. Once she watched him from the dark and never dared come near. Now she closes the distance herself. He offers her the same simple meal he once brought to the shed, bread, broth, warmth held in rough hands. This time she takes it standing beside him, not hidden from the world, but chosen within it, and the story ends on the emotional truth that was earned from the very first night. Once she watched him from the dark and would not come close. Now, when night settled over the fields, she was the one place he no longer had to stand apart from.